then I feel myself I perceive it as lifted out of my body and floating through the ceiling. And I've had out-of-body experiences, and after that more acutely. And then I'm going somewhere and I end up in a vessel that feels like it's circular with kind of ring light lighting, luminous lighting. And there's even one of the tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings that now people call Nordics there. So I wasn't just with the Greys, but this whole experience unfolded. And it was very classic Whitley Strieber type vibe. You know, it was like, okay, I felt like I was on an examining table for like a pelvic exam. I felt cold. It felt cold there. And I looked over and I saw my girlfriend in the same position next to me. Oh, and I'm like, the one I'm visiting.
Welcome. I'm here with Lori Lothian. Lori, welcome back.
Wow, I'm so glad to still be here. Thanks, Sean.
I could talk to you for like the entire day. So, and I know you have like you have a time constraint. So, thank you so much for granting me the graciousness of your time.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to our next topic.
So, before we started recording, prior to the last episode, you mentioned something to me that I had no idea, and I am completely intrigued. So, two things. The first is that you're an experiencer who John Mack interviewed. So start there. But also, you have ties to the Stargate program as a remote viewer, kind of in the aftermath of the disclosure, which I think was probably around 1995 when...
Yeah.
David Morehouse's book came out, and...
Yeah, I thought it was a little later than that, but when the whole thing became publicly known, and and everyone was like, "Oh my God, psychics for seeing things for the intelligence gathering data path." Yeah, so I'm trying to remember. I was pregnant with my daughter, so then if I go back to being pregnant with my daughter, it would have been 1998 that I was with Dale Graff.
Okay, So let's start with John Mack.
Okay,
or just even the experiencer element. Let's start with that. Yeah.
Okay. So I love this topic because it's like, I like to also dispel people's anxiety about the whole thing, but it is a real thing. So I met John Mack. First of all, before I met John Mack, I lived in Washington, D.C., and it was like the time of the book Communion being released. And I was 1991, 92, 93, around that time. And I began to have experiences. Okay. So I was becoming an abductee or an experiencer. Now, really what happened was, I think the lid came off of the topic. It was exposed. It was like Whitley Strieber was being interviewed everywhere. His book was a bestseller. And so then it opened the doors of memories I had. And I began to realize certain things in my childhood and life didn't make any sense and sound a little bit like what he was talking about in his book. Some missing time, sure, but more also, what were those? Was that really an owl in my bedroom? And what was really happening when I was a kid? So it got me curious about it, but also a little bit post-traumatic. Like it's almost like all of a sudden, like, I'm starting to feel like jittery and remembering this might have been my story too. And so there was that. I grew up in a small town in Northern Ontario, Canada. And at an early age as well, I had seen real UFOs in the sky. We don't have a flight path up there. It was off of any flight paths. Okay. There was no air traffic. And we're talking remote, and miles of forests and lakes. And my two sisters and the boy next door and I all have the firm memory of seeing 3 silver discs, sort of flat pewter-like, but silverish, flying through our sky. And we all debate the formation. Was it 1 in front, 2 behind, 2? But we all think it might have been more like a triangle of formation, but they were separate objects. And it was a blue sky day. And we were so freaked out. The kid next door, we were at his house in the yard, ran to get his mother out to see it, but she was napping in the middle of the day. And by the time she got out there, they'd gone north of us. It's just that seeing these silent discs of silver moving through the sky when I was like 9 or 10 with no sound, no flight paths anyway. We didn't have helicopters and airplanes normally. Sometimes we did. We had called the Department of Natural Resources helicopters, but we really didn't have any air traffic. And so that was a wake-up call at 9 or 10, that there was such a thing as objects in the sky that I couldn't identify. That's basically that. But later on, when I was living in Washington, D.C., I began to have flashbacks to maybe having had experiences before, but then it became active again. Now I'm in my early 30s at the time. And my son would say, like, I would get up and then I would wake up in my bedroom at night. And I'd always know the night before something was going to happen because there was a feeling and it was almost surreal. Like I was moving through a sort of sense of surreal energy or so little dissociated energy. And I would go to sleep, and my son, who was only like 5 at the time, he would say the next day, I would be in my bed and I'd see the black-eyed alien, like, the grays, kind of floating. They seemed to be hovering and floating toward my bed. And then I'd be freaked out. My heart would be racing and I'd be in a panic. And often I couldn't move and I felt paralyzed. And then my son the next day would say, Mommy, they were here last night. Like they were in the house. And he would call them something else. The Power Rangers too. That was a show with these black-eyed guys at the time, and he was little. So this is like the early 90s. And sometimes he would identify them as the Power Rangers, and sometimes he would call them the robots. Okay, so there was just that. My husband thought I was insane. I thought I was losing my mind. And I lived right in the city, like Friendship Heights. I was in the DC. I wasn't out in the countryside. It wasn't like they were landing in a field outside my house. Well, anyway, we moved to Annapolis, Maryland, basically in the countryside above Annapolis. And now I was on a river, an acre of trees around me. It was much more solitude there. And there were a few episodes that were pretty intense. My daughter was only 2 or 1 and still in her crib. And my husband, who was an economist with the World Bank, thought this was a bunch of junk and thought I was still crazy. But then he had the experience as well. What happened was one night, here I am with my daughter, and I'm trying to rescue her from this bright light, thinking it's the aliens, and I'm paralyzed and can't move. And I wake up somehow back in my bed the next day. But my left brain economist husband is like, what happened last night? There was all those lights and something was going on, and he couldn't quite put his finger on it. And I told him what it was, but then he still thought I was crazy. But what
year was this?
This would have been, let's see. My daughter would have been a 1.5 or 2. I'd say that would have been in 2000 or 2001. Depends if it was summertime. So I'm thinking it was probably summer of 2001, but it could have been 2000.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
In Annapolis.
North of Annapolis, in the countryside, way up. Like I was on a river.
I have a friend who uses AI to compile and sort these sort of sightings through local newspapers. So he's got I think it might be in the billions. But we can always check and see if there's.
Yeah. So it would have been summer of 2000 or 2001 up near Crownsville, Maryland, basically. That's not exactly the community I was in, but I was pretty close to that one. But the real punchline here is my husband is one thing, but it was my daughter, because it was her I was concerned about. My daughter was speaking at that age, so she's probably 2, and she was not willing to go anywhere near the floor-to-ceiling windows in our living room, which is just off of her bedroom. And for about 4 or 5 months at night, she was afraid. All of a sudden, out of the blue, afraid of the floor-to-ceiling windows in our living room at night that looked out on a river. So there is this sense that she had experienced something as well. And then the final story is how I got to John Mack and what happened then. He's kind of an in-between story for me, because there was I call it the granddaddy of all sightings of our experience moments, because a girlfriend was involved and it was 2 people had the same experience at the same time. So it wasn't just me. I'd gone to visit her in Orange County, California. Where did she? Oh, she actually lived at that point in Laguna Beach, I think. No, Orange County. She was in Orange County. This was me going to visit her. She knew about my abduction problems, or she'd heard about it from me. Again, thought I was a nut job. Anyway, I was staying at her place. And it doesn't make any sense. It's a gated community. Again, it's not in a pasture or a field. And I have the experience happen again. And I'm in my bed and I sit up, and I can see the being at the end of my bed, but it almost looks like an after image, right? An after image, like a camera flash. It's fading out, and I'm freaked out. But I somehow decide I have to go back to sleep, and I do. And I'm in my own room, and then I feel myself I perceive it as lifted out of my body and floating through the ceiling. And I've had out of body experiences, and after that more acutely. And then I'm going somewhere and I end up in a vessel that feels like it's circular with kind of ring light lighting, luminous lighting. And there's even one of the tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings that now people call Nordics there. So I wasn't just with the Greys, but this whole experience unfolded. And it was very classic Whitley Strieber type vibe. You know, it was like, okay, I felt like I was on an examining table for like a pelvic exam. I felt cold. It felt cold there. And I looked over and I saw my girlfriend in the same position next to me. Oh, and I'm like, the one I'm visiting. So this is what happens the next morning. I wake up and she's entering my bedroom and she says, we've got to talk. I go, what? She said, they were here last night. She said, I woke up in the night and I felt there was a presence here and I couldn't move and I was paralyzed and I was terrified because they were going to be coming for you and I wanted to help you. And she was down the hall and she's like, just couldn't move, but I knew they were here, but I was paralyzed. Now, she'd never had anything like this happen. But what was weird, I said, you were there too. You don't remember? She says, no. Now, this is where it gets even eerier. She's willing to entertain that something happened to her, but she's not so sure about it. Now, this is where you get stigmata or bruises. Right? Like often when I've had an experience or an abduction, I'll have 3 bruises, like there's 3 fingers, and I'll get bruise marks in triads, either on my arms or sometimes on my thighs. And she'd never had anything like this happen. And the next day, 2 or 3 days as we went through the, aftermath of this, she had these bruises on her thighs, the old 3 bruised fingerprints. And she was freaked out because I said, well, those are the bruises I've been telling you about for years. So that was my big granddaddy of all experiences. Now, then I met John.
What year was that?
Oh, goodness gracious. I went to visit her when my son was 6. He was born in 89. So that would have been my 89. 89, 99. Yeah. Was he 6? Let me just think if my son was in kindergarten or if he had finished grade 1. That's going to help me remember how old he was. My memory I think he was 6. So early 1990s. I think that would have been 1995.
Okay.
1995 in California. And it could have been 1994. Around either one of those. He was pretty little. 5 or 6. Then I have archival evidence. I can always dredge it up. But right now my memory tells me that. Anyway. It was so important to me that I wrote about it, and I wrote an article about it, and I've had it published. Anyway, probably in the Wayback Machine, I can find the article, but I archived it in an article because it was such an extraordinary experience. So the details that I'm using for memory, I think I could even find the original article because don't forget, I was still a journalist at heart. But anyway, that was a pretty big experience. I met John Mack after his book came out. A friend of mine was friends with John Mack, by the way, but that's not how I met him. I met him because I lived in DC. And there was an event that was going to happen near me, not too far away, the Omega Center, and it was going to be in Virginia. They had a campus in Virginia. And so I decided that I heard about he was going to be doing an experiencer group for a weekend, Saturday and a Sunday. And I thought, I'm going to that no matter what. I need to talk to this guy about what's happened to me. And I had read his book too. So I thought, he's friendly. He doesn't make me into like some sort of traumatized unit. He thought they were psycho-spiritual events that could be very transformative. So I got into a small group of 12 of us at his 2-day event. And then we stayed in touch for several years. But what I found happened in that group was we had a group of people sharing their experiences. He's taking archival notes and stuff because he's still digging down the rabbit hole for himself. And it really was a divided group. We literally had people who were traumatized as if they'd been sexually abused or whatever. And they're literally like walking zombies of trauma. And how can they get the trauma to stop? And there are people like me who are seeing it at a different layer. Like I was more along the lines of, this is scary, because I always would say, if I was approached by, like if I was a bear and a human approached me, I'd be afraid, right? Like I have a visceral primal response to another form of life approaching me. It's all biological. It's all fight and freeze. So I understood that, and I didn't necessarily attribute malice to the events that were happening to me. And that is how I approached it. And so even though it was a really extraordinary experience, is plural experiences that had happened to me, I imagined there was something good for it to be happening. For example, that one time I told you about where my girlfriend had the experience. When I was on the ship, the blonde, tall, blue-eyed being was showing me how to manipulate a ball of light, really right out of the spoon scene in the Matrix, right? Literally, here's this ball of light. I want you to imagine you're holding it. But he was showing me how to make it move and do things with my mind. And so there was a sense that I was being taught something in this experience. And I still even remember when it was time to leave, I was kind of regretting I was going to leave. And there was a kind of a blue light, and it was electric blue white, and it was a portal, like a hole, like you would have a Scotty beam me up, but it was Scotty beam me down. And there was this kind of space, like a hole. And I just was sort of told to step into it. And I floated down. And then I realized that as I was floating down, I felt like I was floating down slowly, that I was going to come back into my body. You know what I mean? I was dropping back into my body in the bed, telling me that this was out of body encounter. But then your body can have stigmata or experiences that reflect what happened, which is really confusing, really. So when I met John Mack, our encounter at the thing was I was one of his faves because I wasn't making like this a trauma story. He actually preferred those of us who could see another layer to this, like an experience that had spiritual meaning. Why was this happening? What good is going to come of it? Why me? In a good way. And then the groups of us that were like that. So we had two halves of the room, the traumatized half and the non-traumatized half. So 6 out of 6 kind of thing. And then he just kept following up with me over the course of about 2.5 years, giving me calls. How's it going? Is it still happening? How are you feeling? And that was lovely of him. And I don't know if he did that with other people, but I found it amazing. And if you ever want to talk to my friend, Elizabeth, who was really good friends with him and worked with him, and she's a psychic out of Australia, you'd love her. I'll get you in touch. She was really
100%.
Very close to John. Yeah. And worked with him one-on-one. And she was a psychic, and she still is. And of course, she's written books, and he, of course, was his thing. And she was quite well versed in the phenomena that I had experienced, but she was really good friends with John. She might be a great interview.
Okay. And do you have a sense for what you think the purpose of these visits were for?
Well, first of all, I think it runs in families based on my dad's experiences. Now, everything my dad said made sense. My dad had encounters, right? I am Celtic. I am red-haired as a child. A green and hazel eyes run in the family. So this is going to seem very politically incorrect, but back in the 90s, somebody wrote a manuscript called Celtic Factor Red. I don't think it ever became a book. And I met this guy on a chat board, a forum back in the day when we had AOL. You've got mail. And he had done this research, and he said, this seems to be running in bloodlines where people have red hair or green or hazel eyes. It's crazy, right? And it's an interesting phenomena because it may be true, because my family is like very Scottish ancestral, extremely. And my dad is like the classic red-haired. His name was Rusty as a kid. I was a redhead as a child. And my children come from the same lineage. And my daughter was there that night. I don't think they were there for me. I think my 2-year-old was abducted or had an experience. So all said and done, it could be that there are certain bloodlines, for instance, like bloodlines that are really good at singing, bloodlines that are really good at dancing, bloodlines that are really good at math. I'm terrible at math. I'm also autistic spectrum disordered. But anyway, so maybe there's certain bloodlines in which you can get their cooperation to do something that they're trying to achieve. Maybe this bloodline that I come from is more porous to non-ordinary events. My bloodline is more psychic. I'm psychic. My sisters are psychic. One's a healer, one's a psychic. I'm a psychic. I was a remote viewer. All of this stuff. My dad had experiences. My mother was psychic. All said and done, maybe it's just because we're like really available, like you knock on a bunch of doors and we open them. So what are they going to do with us? They're trying to help us help humanity.
So I've been thinking very deeply about the topic you just mentioned randomly. So there's actually another Canadian podcaster. I think his podcast is Area 52. And he just recently interviewed John Ramirez, who very rarely appears on American podcasts, but always appears on foreign podcasts. He's former CIA. You do with that what you will, right? CIA cannot operate inside the United States. But on a recent podcast, he mentioned that these, I think he called it hybrid DNA, was highly associated with kind of two bloodlines, Cherokee and Celtic. So now, could it be, you have to throw all sorts of caveats. Could it be disinformation? Could it be maybe? I don't know. But it's interesting you mentioned that. And then from a personal level, I think we were talking earlier, right? My last name, and like I have hazel eyes. I married into a family that has a really strange history in World War II that's only come out like long since the deaths of the grandparents. But their grandmother worked for the OSS. She was an expert on Argentina. And she married a guy who, when he was growing up, or when they would ask him, what do you do during World War II? He says, I was just on a motorcycle. And, they would ask me things like, where should we hide our tanks? And I would just look at what the Germans did and do the same thing. But it turns out he was in the predecessor to Paperclip.
Oh, what is Paperclip?
So Operation Paperclip is when they kind of recruited or captured German scientists and brought them over to the United States. But some of these Nazis escaped to Argentina. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, what the hell's going on? But anyway, married into, a family that's also heavily Celtic, etc. So my son, red hair. My wife's grandfather, red hair. So I don't know. Maybe there's. By the way, this is a personal question. You don't have to answer. But did your children have instances where they would just wander outside the house at like odd times, and you'd freak out because they're gone?
No, I can't say I remember that. Well, I lived in New York City / then DC with my son.
Okay.
So if he wandered outside, man, I was on it, right? So not with that. But when I lived in the countryside, did my daughter do that? We moved back to Canada when she was very young, 3. So I don't remember anything in her really little ages. So only one time did she wander outside the house when she was a child, far from home. So not really. But we lived in cities, and I was in the heart of Vancouver too. Well, and that red hair, green eye, hazel eye combo, that's phasing out, right? That is a part of the genetic pool, the gene pool of humanity that's becoming uncommon, and it's really interesting because the origins of the, hazel, green, red hair, there's lots of stories about that mythologically, where we come from, maybe the Vikings, but whatever it is, it seems like the bloodline, it's not about superiority, like the Cherokee you said, or maybe the Celtic. I think it's about availability. Is the bloodline somewhat fused with some genetic material? Who knows? Quite possibly it's true. But if not, what about just psychic ability? Because I could just really say my whole family's psychic. End of story. Done deal. Psychic meaning available to getting information in non-ordinary ways that are non-linear and that are impossible, like seeing the future. I've seen the future a lot. I see the world events of future the most often in my dreams. I psychically read people, including talking to dead people, for 8 years of my life. And I was very good at it because people came back because I was correct over and over again. And I've got so many stories about things that I saw for people, and I don't even know how I could do that. Like, it's crazy. I mean, I have so many examples, I don't even know where to go, but one of them would have been like, your daughter needs you on the 31st of October. It's something difficult's happening in her life. You need to be there for her, but don't worry, it will work out. Her daughter was hit by a car, an adult daughter, on a bicycle, shock trauma helicopter to Baltimore. I foresaw in dreams my son's 2 near-death experiences before they happen. And so this kind of stuff is if the bloodline, the Celtic bloodline, is psychically wide awake, that might help for the way the contact is trying to happen. Like, I have had out-of-body experiences, and they're very profound. I've got tales to tell, but maybe you need that kind of connection. These people can leave their body, or these people can tune in to what's not physically or linearly or logically available to know or understand. That I think we might just be really good specimens for that.
Yeah, like I said, it's the, again, not often, but precognitive dreams for me. And throughout my life, I never explored all this because it's been very analytical, very focused on math and, getting to the next job and this and that. But there's also this weird animal thing. Like I've gotten really close to deer, like within 3 feet, like just weird, not normal.
That's very St. Francis of Assisi, right? Where all the animals.
Yeah, it feels very much like that. And I have no idea what it is. Right. And I think I'm better with animals than I am with people.
That's fascinating. That is really interesting. Do you find that you are in some kind of state of more equanimity or peace in your life, just as a theme, or, or do you feel any internal differences as you become so available to wild animals not being afraid of you?
Yeah, I just feel much more peaceful being out in nature and around animals and kind of alone than I do. Like going to like a city like New York City for me is like, it's like I'm surrounded. I mean, I hate to say this, but I feel like I'm surrounded by oppressive evil, right? But it doesn't mean it's evil. It's just the energy there is just it's too much. It's just way too much.
Yeah, I hear you. I think New York City has staccato energy, but it depends on your birth chart. For me, it's on a Uranus line. I live there, so I do love it, but I find it tiring. And you might just be very psychically open, because people who are, my daughter and me both have the same problem going into a mall. Like we can't go into a mall. It's exhausting for us. We're like drained because there's just too much. There's too much people, too much congestion of people, too much energy of people around us. And it's really exhausting to be in that environment as well. So, that is a feature of being, well, we'll call it psychic, I guess. You know what I mean? Having extra antenna up than the normal average person.
All right. Well, I'm still figuring it out. I'm in a fight with all this stuff, but the channel definitely helps. Anyway, we got to stop. We got to focus on you. Nobody wants to hear about me.
Keep it in there.
The second, of course, I'm not going to edit it out, but the second part of this interview, we were going to talk about your connection with Project Stargate and Dale Graff specifically.
Yeah.
And you folks who are watching this, you can go back. I have a whole playlist with Dale Graff. As you know, he's focused on dream precognition now. Right.
Is he? So I last intersected him in an email exchange maybe 3 years ago. I'm not sure if that's how long ago it was, to ask him where the documentary went. So let me tell you about me and Dale Graff. I'm a suburban wife. My husband works. I'm at home trying to figure out my reality and raising my child, and I'm doing psychic readings. So my job was me, seeing people for psychic readings in my 30s. And I lived in the Annapolis, Maryland area. And one day I heard about this guy who was going to be doing a gathering in his home on the Chesapeake Bay, teaching people how to remote view. And I'm just like, I think this was 1998, and it would have been this summer maybe. And I'm like, oh, that sounds really exciting. I'm already a psychic. I do talk to dead people and see the future, but this new tool could be a handy toolkit tool. So I want to learn another tool. So I'm going to go there and get my toolkit wider. So I show up, and it's 2 days. It's all day Saturday and all day Sunday. And we have, to learn this tool, and he's teaching us how. It's just really like giving us instructions to practice every day, little, ways to clear the mind, and then how to see the target, the blind target. And then from there.
This is Dale Graff? This is Dale Graff, or is this somebody else?
This is Dale. So Dale was teaching the remote viewing protocol. Okay. Even though that might not have been a specialty as a recruiter, he knew it. And he had housewives and people like me and some dudes in the room that wives had dragged along, but there's only about 12 or 13 of us. It's a small group for a Saturday and Sunday, like kind of like all day, 9 to 5. Anyway, the grand finale is the last day, and we've been practicing the tools and learning the techniques and learning how not to make storylines out of what you see. Because a remote viewing is like almost like a snapshot, like you're being very discreet. I see a round ball. I see this color. I see that. You don't try to then go round ball, blue, earth, you don't make assumptions.
Analytical overlays, right?
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, keep it clean. Yeah. Someone else can compile the data. You're just giving the snapshot you're getting. So anyway, at the end of the day on Sunday in the group, we're finishing in the big grand finale, and he's got this envelope, and in it is a image of something, a photograph or a picture of something. We're all going to do our own attempt to remote view, and he literally just passed the envelope around. We had notepads, and we were all taking our turn, literally tuning into this envelope with something inside of it. Now, I don't know if he double blinded that one, because I don't know if he knew what was in the envelope or not. So I can't remember. But all said and done, so double blind meaning someone else put something in the envelope, or he didn't know which of the 25 pictures would be in there. They could have been, he was blind to it. I don't think he was. I think he knew it was in the envelope. But anyway, it came around to me and I did my notes. Now, here's what happened. I hear the sound of roaring water when I was like tuned in, like roaring water. I see the shape of a horseshoe. And my mind went, it's Niagara Falls. I mean, I grew up in Canada, right? At the Horseshoe Falls. So I'm like, roaring water, horseshoe, roaring water, horseshoe, Niagara Falls. I made the leap. I couldn't see it any other way after that. I thought I just failed my remote viewing test. And then I saw an eagle in my vision flying through the sky, a bald eagle. Well, it's kind of complicated, but at the time I was studying under shamanic training. And so the bald eagle was one of my totem animals at the time, my spirit animal allies. And so I just thought I had an overlay of my spirit animals. So, but when it came time to each of us go in a circle and disclose to the group what we got, it was interesting. Some people said water. I see some water. Some people said things like certain colors, but I was getting insecure as it came to me, because I'm thinking, man, I might be way off here. And I said, I had a roaring water and a horseshoe shape. I said, it reminded me of Niagara Falls. And I didn't say anything about the eagle because I felt that was a contamination. And we went all the way around. And then at the end, he walked up to me and asked me to open the envelope. So he must have known what was inside it, because I don't remember him looking at it first, but I could be wrong. So he handed me the envelope, and he's like, oh my God, he's handing me the envelope. And I opened up the envelope. It's a picture of a bald eagle flying over the Horseshoe Niagara Falls. So what happened is that after that, he wanted to train me on his own, because he had been invited to do a BBC documentary demonstrating how effective remote viewing is. And I would be the remote viewer, but I only was asked because his main person got sick or canceled on him. He had another person all lined up from the regular Stargate program. And so we had to crash work together for about 3 weeks before the filming.
Do you know who that person was?
No, I can't remember. But Dale will remember it. Somebody that was supposed to do it decided not to or couldn't do it. And sometime within 2 to 3 weeks of the actual filming, that's my memory, could have been 2 weeks, he wanted me to step in. And I'm like, whoa, me? And so we did these practice sessions by phone all the time. Like I'd end of the day, get my kids to bed, and he would send me targets and I would tell him what I was getting and all that stuff. And he was training me to get better at it. And then he also noticed I had a skip ahead feature. I was pulled in to train under Dale Graff at the last minute to cover the BBC spot for the documentary. And then we did go film it, and I did successfully do the remote viewing, but I was sweating bullets, and I'm like really shy and was afraid to be on camera, believe it or not. Back then, I still am shy. And what happened was the day before I was supposed to film, I started to get the flu, and I thought I was just having jitters, but I actually came down with the 3-day flu, like a real summer flu virus. And I filmed under that energy of feeling fluish, which was really crazy. And what happened was the day before, I was going to cancel on poor Dale. I never told him this, I don't think, because I thought, I don't feel well and I'm nervous. And I grabbed the dictionary and I said, okay, dear bibliomancy, I'm going to pull a random word out of here to tell me if I'm good to go for tomorrow's filming. And it was the word oracle randomly. So I said, okay, you can do it, Lori. You can be the oracle for BBC. So I went and I filmed it. And I got it right. Basically, I ended up saying, I got the shapes right. I couldn't tell what I was seeing. It was a Spanish galleon. It was double blind. I was put into a room. They were filming me. Dale wasn't with me. He didn't know what I was going to be doing either. What of the many options was in the envelope. And it was a Spanish galleon on the high seas photograph. And it looked like, turning waters and the big mast and stuff like that. But that was what the target was. What I got was a body of water with a church on the edge. I drew a church with a cross on the top, which was on the mast actually, and the shape of the mast as well. And so I didn't describe what it was because I didn't know what it was. I just said, there's this water and then there's this shape. And I said, like my note said, reminds me of a church steeple with the cross on the top. But because it was, how did he do that? Oh, because the final thing was in the BBC documentary, still filming, and he comes in the room and he puts 4 pictures in front of me. And I'm supposed to tell which one I was seeing. Well, immediately I said, well, it's the Spanish galleon on the water with the shape of the thing that I saw. And in the other ones where there was a pyramid and there was another image and another image. So they called that a win, right? Because it's really not up to me to be perfect, like, and go, it's a Niagara Falls. I mean, I got the basic content, the water and the shape of the mast. Yeah. So that was that. And I think, okay, I passed. I'm sweating bullets, took my kid home and spent 2 days in bed with the flu. I literally was so sick before and after. I can't believe I pulled that whole thing off. Yeah. Yeah.
So did you do anything else for him in terms of?
No. It was a one-off thing with Dale, although we did stay in touch a bit by email over the years, and eventually one of the main reasons I tried to stay in touch is like, did you ever get your hands on that documentary? And I don't know what his answers were. Like, I never saw the actual final footage and what was given, how much of it was shown. It was introduced to me as a documentary on the frontiers of consciousness research, but I think I emailed him 3 or 4 years ago. But no, we didn't stay in touch because I moved. Shortly after that, I moved back to Canada. Yeah.
Now, it's interesting with Dale Graff, because the other thing about Dale Graff is that when he worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, he was next door to the Project Blue Book office.
Wow.
And I asked him, like, did you see? And, even if he did see, it seemed to me that he knew more than he was letting on.
He's got a story to tell one day.
Well, I mean, he's in his 80s, so I don't think he's going to tell that story unless he's on his deathbed or something. But yeah, he's an interesting character. He's the guy who ran the remote viewer that President Carter talked about when they found that Tupolev, I think, bomber in Africa.
I didn't know that. My memory of Dale was he was a very kind, fun, sweet man teaching a bunch of muggles how to remote view.
He's the kindest person.
Yeah. And I just happened to be not quite muggly. So I picked it up really quickly. You know what I mean? I learned it really fast. But I mean, to this day, I playfully do remote viewing targets for myself just because I have fun with it. I have some of them lying around the house, like index cards that I will write down maybe 30 questions. And this time, last summer, my partner wrote down 30 questions on index cards, gave them stupid little names like XYV216 is my target. And then I stopped doing them last summer. I was just too busy. And I pulled up one of them like 4 days ago and just remote viewed it for myself. Like I wrote on the envelope, the target was inside the envelope within a cue card, index card. And it was so funny because I was actually remote viewing something that had happened already, right? I was remote viewing back in time. I didn't know what the target was. And the question was the 2024 election. And I had a remote viewing of, I would say, decrepit man, like a very frail old man with wispy gray hair. And that was Joe Biden, obviously. And this was a remote viewing index card created in July of last 24. And I wrote down August. I didn't know if it was what year it was. I wrote the month of August. And oh my God, the card was like a total winner. I had decrepit old man loses his head. Old man, what was he here? And August is what I wrote. August was the DNC when Kamala Harris officially took the role of the person to run for office. And losing one's head, like head of state, is a phrase, right? You can, be decapitated from your position of power. And so I called it. And there was another piece of that with a broken bridge. And I don't know what the broken bridge means. Like it can be a metaphor, like, the bridges have been broken between him and his handlers. I don't know. But anyway, yeah. So that was a really clean view, but it wasn't something that was going to happen. It's something that had happened, which reminds us we can see backwards and forwards in time.
Oh, it gets even creepier than that. There have been experiments where they would give remote viewers a target, but the target was not selected yet. So they would just ask them to remote view, not look at the results, but they would just generate the results. And then they would randomly select an image to correspond to that target. And the remote viewers would still be accurate.
Yes. Well, that is crazy. Wouldn't that be retrocausality? reverse causality.
Yeah, there's a huge element of retrocausality.
It is. I was hired to actually find a treasure called the Dan River Treasure in North or South Carolina by some people who knew I could remote view. I did that in my 30s as well, when I still lived in the United States. But that was a tough one. I don't know if the data I got over multiple RVs ever led to them finding what I was trying to target by looking at landscape features, by trying to look at it in terms of coordinates, latitude, longitude, and stuff like that.
All right. Any final words for the audience before we get cut out again?
No, the universe is a strange and mysterious place. And I only have any words for anybody. Some of the stuff we're talking about, you don't have to be super special. I taught people how to do remote viewing. I've taught people how to tune into their psychic abilities. I mean, I've had this success stories with like the engineer in my class years ago who was, I think his wife dragged him to the class, turned out to be the superstar of the group, on using techniques to blindfold your conscious mind and let you see things without having to worry about it, like remote viewing can be as well. So I want to also encourage people to investigate their own non-ordinary perceptual abilities. We all have them. I can't sing, I carry a tune, but I can still, I have a voice, right? Where some of us may be naturally better than others, but we all have this ability and we can all practice it and we can all learn to get better at it and trust it and trust our intuition, trust our dreams, like listen in, right? Signals are there. We just have time where we've got ourselves tuned out to the signals.
All right. Well, I could talk to you for hours. So.
I think so too. I might have to have you on my channel in the future, okay? Because I'm going to start.
I mean, given my subscriber count, I don't know how I can help. But
no. I want to start a new section on my channel. I've been talking about it for like a month, where I'm going to interview people who are extremely interesting, like you, woo people in the area of near-death experience, aliens, abductions, UFOs, but even your stories. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to be able to talk about the natal chart uncannily representing the person's life story, their experiences, but also being in topics that I'm interested in, like this kind of stuff.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I think we're going to record something else. It'll either be on YouTube or it'll be on Patreon. Who knows?
Oh, I love the second episode there. It was so full of great internet cutouts.
Yeah. It was annoying to say the least.
Yeah.
But, all right. Talk soon.
Thanks.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does, But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.